We are live on Restream talking tonight about HR1. I'm Rob, and we also have Ben, and we're talking tonight about HR1, which has been called by the liberal side of the debate the For the People Act, and it's been touted as essential and necessary for saving democracy. At the same time, I would like to point out that there are elements of the bill that appear to be pretty antithetical to democracy. There are provisions in the bill for public funding of campaigns going forward. Now, we all know what public funding means. That means taxpayer funding. That means your tax dollars. Funding for campaigns, well, feasibly, that could mean your tax dollars being used to fund the campaigns of candidates you might not agree with, causes you might not agree with. You might even see this money used for attack ads that on behalf of candidates you don't agree with, and these ads could be attacking the candidates that you do agree with, who you would like to see your money go towards. Now, how democratic does that sound to you? I would love to hear Ben try to explain that one.
Well, thank you, Rob. And I hear you saying that HR1 is going to use taxpayer dollars as a way to fund attack ads that people don't want and fund attack ads that support issues that they don't support. But you neglect to mention, Rob, that HR1 is funded by money taken from wealthy tax cheats and white-collar criminals. So, Rob, I just want to know, how is that taxpayer money?
Well, Ben neglects to mention that there are elements of HR1 that are being funded by taxpayer money. And that has to raise the question of how the campaigns for office are going to be funded, because we have to remember that the price tag for campaigns for office and the number of campaigns for office has been pretty high, especially in the last few years. The presidential elections alone in the last several election cycles have run in the billions of dollars. And in addition to the presidential election campaigns, and there's usually at least a number of them on each side of the aisle, there are 200 plus House campaigns with at least multiple candidates in those. There are 33, 34 Senate campaigns with at least multiple campaigns in those. And that's just at the federal level. How much money does Ben think that settlement money from white-collar crime and wealthy tax cheats actually raise to be able to spend on these when the overall price tag of campaigns goes into the, well into the billions of dollars? If we don't know it, if we don't know how much that settlement money is, and we know that taxpayer funding is being used in elements of HR1, where do we think that some of that money is going to come from for campaigns?
Well, it's very fascinating that you say this, Rob, because it's true that that we have to find a way to fund this. But I'd like to point out, look here. This is from the Justice Department, and this is $3 billion of false claims cases that were recovered. And here's an article from Duke Law. Right here, it shows that $20 billion were the settlement for the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. There were $200 billion in fines collected from U.S. banks for conduct before, during, and after the mortgage bank security collapse. So the government collects a lot of fees all the time. In fact, the FBI says that white-collar crime is estimated to cost the United States more than $300 billion annually. So, Rob, it's not like the government is just getting nickels and dimes on white-collar crime. There's a lot of white-collar crime. And finally, to address your other argument, you said that that there was other money going to other things in HR1 that was taxpayer money. What, do you mean like paper ballots so that we can have integrity of our elections? Or do you mean money that's being put towards different efforts of voter registration? What of that money are you talking about, Rob? And so, yeah, that's our scene.
All right.
So you've seen, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. So yeah, just to make clear, we were both in character for that, and we actually got the idea for doing this particular back and forth, and in particular, the arguments that I was putting out there from on my side for opposing HR1 actually came largely from a video that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell recorded on the floor of the Senate to voice his opposition to HR1. And so the lines of thinking that I used were inspired, and in addition to the lines of thinking, me wearing a suit with a red tie were inspired by trying to play the role of presenting Mitch McConnell's arguments.
Yeah, and so I was taking the side of somebody who supports HR1, and I think we had some interesting debate there. It really kind of made me think when we were debating about how some of these arguments that are made, they're so difficult to approach if you hear them, right? Like for instance, it's not necessarily clear that the act is actually financed by wealthy tax cheats and by white-collar criminals. And so those arguments are difficult to deal with unless you've got the fact, especially what you were dealing with when you brought up the thing that Mitch McConnell didn't invent, which was that how are you going to be able to pay for it then? If you turned it around, how are you going to be able to pay for it if it's white-collar crime? How much white-collar crime can there be, in essence, was your argument, right?
Which, by the way, I think I can say this on the live feed, but we actually did a little research on how much white-collar crime there was before deciding to include that in this in this back and forth.
Yeah, most people don't have the advantage of being able to pull up a link in their debate and do it. But of course, this is the world of art and fantasy, and so we get to make our debates maybe a little bit more fair, because in the real world they're not this fair. Which one of the pieces that didn't get included in this was just with the Disclose Act. All those attack ads. The irony is kind of that with the attack ads, that you have all these attack ads, like in Montana, for instance. You have all these attack ads airing in the last 30 days of an election with tons of money in the election where somebody can't even fight back to them. There's no way to even fight back against that. And so we had all these attack ads going on in real life, and nobody knows where the money's coming from. It's all last minute. And so in HR1, there's actually provisions for trying to to make it so that you actually have to disclose where the money's coming from, and you actually have to share, like when you put out an ad, if it's a corporate ad, not just if it's a politician, but if it's a corporate ad, the corporation has to stand by that ad too. So they have to actually, if they're putting a lot of money into that, they actually have to put that on there, and the people who are donating the entities.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you bring that up, Ben, because something that I imagine we can anticipate coming up is that there are people like Mitch McConnell and a lot of those corporations who benefit more from keeping the status quo in place and the current system in place and not passing HR1. And so we will, we brought the line of thinking about attack ads into our exchange, and there probably will be a lot of attack ads funded by these corporations, in the weeks and months to come, in opposition to the bill. And another thing that it seems fair to say that Mitch McConnell did, and I most definitely did, trying to present Mitch McConnell's arguments, was to put out essentially straw man arguments where you say that, because there's taxpayer funding somewhere in the bill, that there, inevitably taxpayer funding and your tax dollars are going to be used to, to fund the campaigns and causes that you don't agree with. And that's big and scary, pushes the fear hot buttons for people.
Yeah. Well, and just so people know in the audience, right, a straw man argument is where you take your opponent's argument and you make it into the argument that you'd like to argue against, rather than arguing against the real argument. And that happened when Rob was saying that with the taxes, that because there's taxpayer money in HR1, that taxpayer money would somehow go to other stuff, which wasn't true, but that was the argument that he wanted to argue against. And it was interesting because also because one of the other deception tactics in this, while we're on the topic of deception tactics, right, there was also you were arguing that the priority was not to spend tax dollars on publicly financed campaigns, right? Because people wouldn't want their tax dollars going to that. But there's a much larger issue here, which is that we want competitive elections. We don't want elections where one side can take unlimited corporate money and the other side either has to take a lot of corporate money and then become dependent on the funders rather than being dependent on the people, right? Which is James Madison's point in the Federalist, is a government dependent on the people alone, not a government dependent on the funders.
Yeah. Well, and the argument's made that, the people who like the status quo often make the argument, well, the system we have in place right now makes it so that the government and people running for office do have to be like the system right now makes it so that they do have to be responsive to the people, but which people? It's a small slice of the electorate that essentially has more power, and their money, their influence, their say matters more because they have the money to throw around. And I would imagine that James Madison probably envisioned a system where government was supposed to be responsive to all of the people. I mean, knowing that it was Madison, did it necessarily mean from a Southern founding father in the early 1800s to be like responsive to every single one of the citizens of all race, gender, creed, or color? Maybe not, but maybe we can assume that it meant more than just like the privileged elite that had money.
Yeah, that's a good sort of original. Well, and it was not the rich more than the poor, right? He says that
Right.
as well. Not the rich more than the poor, but the people alone.
Yeah.
And that's what the House of Representatives is supposed to be. Not as much the Senate, unfortunately, right? Which was some people would argue a tragic compromise. So anyhow, before we get too much in the weeds, are there any other thoughts you've got, Rob?
We hope this will be an opportunity to have for everybody in the audience who is tuned in right now and who might tune into our work in the future, that this is an opportunity to get some fact-based insight into HR1 and all of the perspective that goes that's behind all of the arguments on it. Some of the discussion in other elements of the public sphere may or may not be totally based in reality, and we hope everyone came away from tonight thinking that what we touched on reflected a motivation to really present something that is true and real, and in the spirit of what HR1 is trying to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If I had any other thoughts about this, the only other thing I'd point out, and we've talked about this before, is that we don't actually know how much the government typically collects from white collar crime and from wealthy tax cheats. So if you know, you can add us on Twitter @CauseConscience. You can also email us info@causeconscience.org. That's info@causeconscience.org. And let us know. And furthermore, if you want to do something like this with us, if you're looking to do this, if you want to participate, we're focusing on HR1 right now. That's our big focus for now. If you want to join us, just email us, send us a tweet. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/cause-conscience. I know I've got it wrong here, but it's cause-conscience. And then, but yeah, find us on Twitter, email us. We're all over the internet, and you can join us if you have questions. If you know the number for wealthy tax cheats, for white collar crime, send us that number. Find us a link. If there's things in HR1 that you're curious about, that you want to learn with us, let us know. We'll make a video about it. So, and if you want us to try to game this video out in a different way, we'll take the same concept and do it in a different way. So, again, this has been great, Rob.
Awesome. This was fun. I think there's going to be more. A lot.
I
more.
agree. A lot more. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Have a great night, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for checking us out.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks for the truth in the matter, Ben.
Oh, thank you for the truth in the matter. That was great. That was a lot of fun. Thank you. And catch us again.